Welcome to the Earned First podcast. This is Arun Sudhaman, founding editor at Earned First, and we are very happy to be joined today by Mary Njoki, who's the founder and CEO of Glasshouse PR in Nairobi, Kenya. Mary, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I think you are the first podcast guest we have had from Africa. So I'm very happy about that.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And we are going to discuss a few things about the African PR landscape today.
Sure.
Starting with a new research study that Glasshouse came out with a couple of weeks ago, the State of PR in Africa report. It's not the first
Yes.
time you've done it. I think you've done it for a few years now, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Yes.
But there's some very interesting findings. The African PR landscape in general, I feel, is it's not especially well researched, and so I think it's really valuable to have studies like this. You spoke to, or your team spoke to, I think something like 54 agencies across the continent. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And that represents, I think, more than 6,500 people working across those firms. So it gives an interesting picture of the state of play. And in particular, you focused on AI, of course, very relevant. So tell us, what were the headline findings that emerged from the report? And we will perhaps discuss some of the opportunities and challenges in more detail. But from your perspective, what struck you most in terms of the findings?
For me, it's the AI tipping point, and that's what I'm calling it. Just to find that 81.5% of senior professionals describe themselves as people who are actually now using AI, and there are 3.7% of people who said they were not using AI. But then, what was surprising is the most strategic impact of the use of AI was content creation. Which was at 85.2%, and it was not being used for social media, social listening, or sentiment analysis, media monitoring, etc. It wasn't being used for the key workflows, but was being used for the basic workflows, which is content creation. So a lot of use on writing assistants and graphic designs. Yeah.
Right. So content creation is the big focus,
Yeah.
but not so much in terms of some of the more sophisticated work that some of
Yeah.
these AI tools can do in terms of analytics, in terms of
Yeah.
listening.
Yeah.
You mention in the report that there's a substantial training gap. Um, I think 59% of practitioners report, 59% of practitioners with more than a decade of experience report that their AI competency has come through self directed learning rather than formal programs. And only 61% of students say they have encountered AI in their coursework at all. So, how big of a concern is this for you, first of all? And secondly, do you think maybe that's why the usage is still focused on um, some of the, I guess you could say, the lower value areas like content creation?
Yeah, I think I'll call it basic. And it's funny that when we were launching the guest of speaker who is the envoy of technology from the office of the president came and told us, if you guys think that using chat GPT is what that means that you're using AI, please guys, you need to rethink again. And I found
Mm.
that quite interesting. And I think it's because people are learning by themselves, that we don't yet have courses that have been established to teach, whether it's marketing leaders or communication leaders. Obviously, even in the curriculum, I mean, when you go back to universities, especially here, people are still learning the traditional way of doing, whether it's PR, traditional way of using, of creating content. And therefore, people like young people, the Gen Z, they've learned by themselves on how to create content, which we've seen across social media. But yeah, there's a huge gap when it comes to AI adoption in the academia or in education. So people are just
Mm.
learning by themselves, but they don't really get to a place where they learn how to integrate AI to the real workflows of PR. Yeah.
And what do you think perhaps needs to change to make AI training a reality? Is it something that consultancies like yours should be addressing, or do you think it's a question for the education sector more?
Well, we've already stepped in. A few weeks ago, we went to this university and I was speaking about the integration of AI in PR and communication. And one of the professors approached me and he asked me, "Can you come and train the faculty? Because we are teaching them the traditional way of doing PR and communication because that's what we know, that's what we were trained. We would like a formal training or a course that can enable us to actually come and now train our students, accurately. We'll just integrate it in our curriculum. So yeah, so I went back and started researching, and we have actually come up with a training that trains whether it's the faculties in the universities, the senior marketing and communication professionals, so that they're able to integrate this. Because I don't think universities are yet there, but since we
Mm.
have data, we have data which has informed how we can train them, and we have in-house teams that have been pushing themselves day and night to learn about these
Mhm.
new technologies. It's changing every day, so we are at the forefront of even implementing these trainings. Yeah.
Mm. That's great to hear. Um, in terms of penetration, you already mentioned the percentage of senior practitioners that describe themselves as very familiar and actively using AI tools. Of course, uh, it's Chat GPT and Gemini are the dominant tools, I believe. But among students, you found penetration is even higher. So
Yeah.
97.5% of
Yeah.
university respondents, that's across Kenyan institutions, are using AI tools. Um,
Yeah.
Almost two-thirds have already created PR content using
Mm.
AI. I'm curious as to why you decided to poll students and to look into student usage. Many of these AI studies that we have seen from across the world, they actually have largely ignored students. What made you think it was important to look at what students are doing?
First of all, we're thinking of the next generation of the PR professionals. And because of the conversation that we've been having, specifically in the global south or in Africa, being that by the average age of our our people is 19 years old. So there's nothing that we
Mm.
can do we can't do a research and ignore them. We really need to
Mhm.
know where their minds are, what they're thinking, how they're using AI. And when you look at our social media, especially in Kenya or in Africa, again, they are on Instagram, TikTok, they're creating content, they're the ones shaping narratives. If you remember the conversation in 2024 in Kenya around the Gen Z movement, who created content, went and dissected how the financial bill was. They taught other young
Mm.
people, and it became a whole movement until the president decided to change the bill. So they are shaping narratives and shaping policy using digital campaigns and and tools. So we were like, these are the next generation of this profession, and we cannot ignore them. One, two, we need to know what is going on in their minds. So that's why
Mm.
we decided to engage them. Yeah.
Very important, I think, to understand how they are shaping AI usage as well. And a very well made point, I think, on the average age, too. Something I think that people perhaps who are sitting in more mature or more established PR markets, it's the kind of thing that they don't necessarily appreciate. about some of
Yeah.
the global South countries.
Yeah.
Um, some of the concerns cited in your study are interesting, especially in terms of younger professionals, Gen Z respondents. They cite over reliance on AI is a big fear. There's also concerns about loss of creativity and originality. More than half flagged ethical risks tied to misinformation and algorithmic bias. Um, and then there's also concerns about algorithm changes. So, did any of these concerns surprise you at all? But what do they tell us, perhaps, about how AI is being adopted?
First of all, I like saying that the concerns usually come because of the movies we watched or because of the science fiction movies like Terminator or the iRobot. But I also, I mean, and I understand because it's a conversation. We were asking them so that we understand where do we find ourselves. So with professionals, we truly believe that humans cannot be replaced by an AI. But also, I read a particular study a few weeks ago that was done by MIT, and they were comparing students who use ChatGPT and the students that don't use ChatGPT, and they were studying the way their brains work. And I
Mm,
noticed in that study that the brains of the students who use ChatGPT were a bit dulled, and then the brains that don't use ChatGPT were firing more. And I'll share the link with you to see that study. I found it quite interesting. So the concerns
mhm,
are there, but it's to understand as the human in the loop in this conversation, how do you rise above being controlled by a machine, but be the one controlling the machine? And
mhm,
some of the things I've been learning recently is even how do you prompt this particular, machine? Because I look at what people are doing in the office, and I can tell someone who didn't think through and they just decided to prompt an AI and give them a basic prompt, and someone who actually thought through, took time, so by the time, they were prompting this AI, the AI was enhancing what they're doing. So
mhm,
definitely AI, if you're not thinking, it will not help you at all if you don't have proper judgment, if you don't have proper intuition, if you don't decide to be the human agent who will who will um, um, who will be in the loop and have proper judgment, or what I call sound judgment, to be able to know that this tool is here to enhance what I'm doing, and therefore I can give it a proper prompt. So it's doing my work, yes, but it's not thinking for me. I'm the one who is thinking and then prompting it to enhance what I'm supposed to be doing. But yes, the concerns are indeed valid when it comes to algorithm biases, volatility. I think we can speak about that the whole day, because
mm,
in our study we discovered that you don't know the tech behind algorithms.
mhm,
Then the tech companies, I mean, they're not telling us how the algorithms work, and we can see the biases from where we are. In our research, PR agencies were saying they've created content that didn't go to the specific people they were trying to target. And when you go deeper, you'll see it's the algorithm
mhm,
volatility. And we know algorithm is based on probability, heuristics. So there's the science behind that probably we need to go deeper into as PR agencies or as content creators, as we are creating content, to understand if I want to create content and I want it to reach this particular group of people, how do I go about it? But
mhm,
then I guess there's the whole conversation on governance, and the whole conversation on how do we as PR people probably have conversation with tech companies. So it's a whole um, conversation that needs to be broken down indeed. Yeah.
It's such a fascinating point because as machines become effectively stakeholders, you know, it's very difficult if there is an imperfect understanding of how these algorithms work. How are they
Yeah.
prioritizing different types
Mm.
of information? When you're dealing with with a journalist, for example,
Mm.
um, it's a much simpler equation, isn't it? You can sometimes ask them, or you can understand by looking at their track record. It's much more difficult with algorithms. So you're right. I think that will become an increasingly critical issue. And then the point on over reliance on AI, I think, is fascinating too. I have a feeling we may have linked to that MIT study. There have been a
Okay.
few studies about this.
Yeah.
There was one about brain fry, I recall,
Mm. Yeah.
which might have been the same one, and it found that
Yeah.
basically people will burn out the more they use
Yeah.
AI, the less
Yeah.
they're able to think.
Mm.
And I suppose we are all learning about these technologies in real time. Um, I myself find I get quite scared about the thought that I will, not be able to think for myself. And I do think we have to be quite intentional. You're right
Yeah.
about AI
Yeah.
reliance. So, in
Yeah.
terms of the overall,
Mhm.
let's talk a little bit about the overall public relations market. Looking at Kenya, where Glasshouse is based, but also Africa more broadly. Um, it hasn't been, for the global PR market, it hasn't been a particularly easy period the last couple of years. And now, of course, because of so much geopolitical disruption, there's a lot of caution in the marketplace. How optimistic are you about the PR market in Kenya and perhaps beyond Kenya, in East Africa, looking at the year ahead?
I think because of how ingenuity that we can get. There's a lot for us, but I'll take you back to the report we did last year. So in the report that we did last year, one of our key finding was people don't understand the value of PR. So over the we've come from far. So even when I was starting the agency 13 years ago, I remember events would be equated to PR. And I'd be there trying to tell people events are not PR. Then, of course, we transitioned to okay, PR is about sending press releases and making sure the journalists cover me. Then it transitioned to if I have a crisis, that's when I call a PR firm. So we've come from far as a African PR industry, and we've come to a place where we are now thinking of strategies. We are thinking of what is ahead and looking at such a report which is showing that digital media or tech and AI are shaping the industry. And we are looking at our young people, the next generation. So we've come from far, and there's such a big opportunity. Of course we stand at a place where still many SMEs, or I call them medium enterprises in Africa, they have some of them have their communication people sit in their marketing department. So we are still having, such conversations. PR has not yet come out as its own discipline yet, but we are getting there with the different associations that are around Africa, with a different understanding that is coming up with technology. Because as well, the reason we concentrated on the use of AI and digital media campaigns of digital media first was last year we discovered that the digital first campaigns were growing really fast, and people were curious on the use of AI in the industry. So there's the curiousness in the industry, and there's such a great opportunity for the industry to actually grow. Yeah.
Mm. Well, if it's any consolation, even in America, you see comms people in the marketing department. It's not it's not something that's limited to Africa alone at all.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's a persistent challenge.
Yeah.
There's always, it seems, a tendency to try and find other ways to structure communications,
Yeah.
and they don't always reflect the value. In terms of your own work, how what have you found most effective in order to make that case to prove the value of communications? And perhaps to demonstrate that it does require investment and budgets.
Yeah. It's just a strategic move from just saying you're doing PR to strategic communication. Actually, there's some, for a while, if you go to some meetings or if you say PR in Kenya specifically, people will be like, oh, that's politics. Oh, that's spinning. That's propaganda. So at some point, I
Mm,
used to tell people, I need to do PR for PR. But then, how much can you do that? So
mm,
I decided to be, can we now transition to strategic communication and make sure, when our clients come on board or organizations or whoever we are speaking to, we understand their objectives. What are they trying to meet? Whether it's in terms of business, PR, whatever they understand PR is. Why did they come to us? So just even querying the people who are coming to us on what exactly are they looking into, and then now journeying with them, but not as just an agency, but as a partner, more of a
mm.
partner that you're building whatever you're building, and we are willing to help you meet your objectives, whether it's thought leadership, whether it's credibility, whether it's visibility. So it's just now becoming more of a strategic communication partner to our customers or clients. Yeah.
It's good to hear. Another initiative I think that uh, no doubt is helping the development of public relations is your work as the chair of Africa PR Week,
Yeah.
which is an event that I attended last August in Nairobi. I thought it was amazing. I have to say, I had such a great
Like,
time. Nairobi is
yeah.
a great city anyway,
Yeah.
but to come to such a vibrant conference that brought so many interesting speakers together,
Yeah.
really nice feeling of community, and I think some really strong conversations. So tell us about your vision in terms of this event, because it only launched, was it last year or the year before?
Yes, last year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Quite interesting. So Africa PR Week came about or was brought forth after I came from ICCO Global Summit in Turkey.
Mm,
And what I saw was, number one, there's the African story has not yet been told accurately globally.
hmm.
Whether we can blame the algorithms, but then we can also blame we can also see how we've not yet come together to actually shape that conversation. We are busy
Hmm.
shaping the conversations of our client or shaping the narratives, but what is the African narrative? And there's the last five years, everyone has been saying Africa is the next frontier,
Hmm.
etc. But no one as PR professionals, we are the most powerful voices that can tell the stories of our countries, the stories of what is happening, the diversity of Africa, because we see brands coming in or organizations coming in Africa, and they think, one, Africa is one country, two, they think the strategy that will work in Kenya will work in Uganda or will work in Nigeria. So the idea of Africa PR Week was to bring forth the diversity of what Africa is, tell the African stories, but then there was a gap in terms of bringing all these professionals together to shape how the industry is in Africa. People have done it, whether it's in country, but it's not yet been done from a continental perspective. So that was also the reason Africa PR Week has come together to shape the industry from a continent perspective, and also join and also put Africa on a global, stage, where we can now showcase this is the industry globally. This is the communication out of Africa, and this is how it's shaping, whether it's geopolitics, shaping the narrative of what is happening globally. Yeah.
Uh, I couldn't agree more with the vision. The story of Africa is not told well enough on the global stage, and in particular, I would argue the story of Africa as communicators is not told well enough. What do you think the world can learn from Africa from a communications perspective?
One is the diversity.
Mm,
There's a diversity that people can learn from Africa. Two, it's the community aspect. Even when we came together, even right now, I think if you've seen our pages, there's such a way that people rally to like around each other. The other day we did a feature on Rwanda, and it's
mm,
like everyone from Rwanda decided to come out and support their people who we had featured, and there were all these conversations from Rwanda. Rwanda Air reached out, MTN Rwanda reached out. So there's this whole community thing that they can learn from
mm,
us. But then also now understand now see the authenticity that also come with Africans.
mm.
That's also something that the world can learn from us. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Africa is a rising force, no doubt. We see that in particular in terms of culture, in terms of the arts, in terms of music, in terms of sport. Um, what do you think needs to happen for African business to play a bigger role, in fact, to take its rightful place, I would say, on the global stage?
Most people would say it's about the resources, but I beg to differ.
Mm,
I think it's more of do we understand who we are as Africans? Because I think we are quite unique. We are quite a peculiar people,
mhm,
and our uniqueness is what would set us apart, and also telling our stories. I think I look into Cameroon, I look into Rwanda, I looked into different countries, even the content that people create from Nigeria, from Johannesburg, all these places. Cairo, I was in Cairo the other day, and you see the stories, the diversity, the authenticity that comes with, whether it's even a startup. When they're starting
mhm,
out, there's a whole story from like Silicon Valley, where everyone started in a garage. But we also have our own stories and our own ingenuity and innovation on how people start out things. And it's now learning how to tell these stories. And the
mm,
fact that we have digital media and mobile first, is also a big deal here. So how can we now leverage on the internet and digital to tell our stories? Because the stories in Africa are just amazing. And
mhm.
as a business person, if I can leverage on telling my story on a digital platform, then that would scale me and position me globally. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, there's a considerable amount of digital and mobile fluency, as you mentioned, um, given the relative youth um, in Africa, but also it enables perhaps African companies or brands to bypass the traditional gatekeepers. Um, and one of the challenges, I guess, is that when you're talking about, let's say, the mass media, particularly in terms of global media or Western-based media, um, there's always been a certain kind of narrative around Africa. Uh, do you think it's possible these days to bypass that? Are there different kinds of media, or is it just a question perhaps of using your own media channels?
Well, so last year when we were having Africa PR Week, if you went to TikTok and searched for Africa, you would find hungry children, just interesting narrative around Africa. But then, for some reason, when iShowSpeed did his tour in different African countries, when you'd search, you'd see, oh wow, this is like Africa. I didn't know they
Mm,
have this high rises, etc. But then for me, there's the aspect of algorithm, which we'll probably have to keep discussing. But then at the
mm,
same time is how do we as a storyteller or as a business person? How do I use my own media to continually tell my story? The consistency, like when you think of search engine optimization, and I know we've switched to GEO now, but then how do I continually, whether I use keywords, tell my story, make sure my website is optimized to be positioned on a global stage. So it's the consistency there in, and also now telling my story over and over so that all these platforms can pick these conversations that I'm having. Yeah, using owned media.
Absolutely, but we need to figure out these algorithms. That seems clear, right? Because they are um, powerful and they seem to be becoming, increasingly influential. Particularly when you're talking about the reputation of an entire continent. And how many, billions of people.
Mm,
We are essentially allowing algorithms into which we have very little insight
yeah,
to have an enormous amount of influence. I think this is
yeah.
going to be an issue that only becomes more and more prominent. So thank you for raising that. Just before we close, a couple of things. One, I should point out to any listeners here to this podcast who are from Africa that Earn First is running the first edition of its consultancy performance index for African PR firms. So please, if you'd like to visit our website, you can submit your firm into the research process. It doesn't cost anything, and it means that
Mhm.
we can benchmark and identify the region's most innovative consultancies in the same way we have done this already in the Middle East and Asia. Mary, give us just one or two things that you're very excited about in terms of new developments from Africa PR Week that perhaps will persuade people to attend the event.
Wow, I'm very excited by the involvement of everyone from across every part of Africa. So last year when we held the event, there's this conversation around people who are from sub-Saharan Africa, and we had, the normal countries, the Nigerias, the Ugandas, the Ghana, the Tanzania, the Kenya, South Africa,
Mm,
etc. But now we've seen, even as we're having conversation, people from Morocco, people from Egypt, people
great.
from Tunisia, people from Mauritius who are interested. They want to come, they want to be engaged, they want to be involved in
Mm,
this conversation. I think 2 days, is it 2 days ago, we were very surprised about people from Algeria. And there's a football match last week, and apparently there was this whole conversation of whether Algerians are Africans. And then suddenly, we featured a few of them, and it became a whole conversation, and they were very excited and they want to come. So just looking into how it's no longer about the sub-Saharan Africa, it's about the whole continent, bringing the different diversity, understanding how the industry is from north to south to west to east to central. So very excited about that.
mm,
I am looking forward to meeting people from Morocco, from
yeah.
all these different interesting countries, Senegal, etc. So that's quite exciting. The other exciting thing is, definitely the different speakers and partners that we have globally, whether it's you, Arun, coming on
Mhm.
board, the likes of Paul Holmes, the likes of Rod from the UK, just the
Yep.
diversity of the global speakers and the global perspective being brought into Africa, but at the same time, seeing other African speakers, people who have been doing really a lot in the communication industry coming on board to speak and to share. So, quite exciting. Yeah.
Indeed, and there's so much strength, I think, in that diversity. Mary, thank you so much for your time. We will look forward to learning more about the African PR landscape through your work. I will see you later this year in Nairobi. And hopefully, we can get you back on the podcast at some point too. So, thank you.
I look forward. Thank you so much, Arun, for having me.